The rope around Tucker Reed's wrists burned like fire as he strained against his bonds. Blood trickled down his forearms, staining the dusty floor of the abandoned mining shack. Through the cracks in the weathered boards, he could see the sun beginning its descent over the Arizona territory, marking his second day of captivity. The year was 1875, and the West was still wild enough for a man to disappear without questions. 3 days earlier, Tucker had been tracking a wounded buck across the scrubland when fate intervened. A faint cry caught his ear. Human, desperate, female. Following the sound to a dilapidated corn crib on the edge of the Hargrove property, he'd discovered a young woman bound and abandoned. Willow Montgomery, 20 years old, 3 days without food and precious little water. "Help me," she'd whispered through cracked lips. "Please." Now Tucker was the prisoner, and somewhere out there, Willow was on the run again. The irony wasn't lost on him. The door to the mining shack creaked open, silhouetting Celis Hargrove against the dying light. The older man's thin frame belied his cruelty. Behind him loomed his eldest son, Ezra, a hulking shadow with dead eyes. "Evening, Mr. Reed," Celis said, his voice gentle as a rattlesnake's warning. "Ready to tell me where she went?" Tucker spat blood onto the floorboards. "Go to hell!" Celis nodded to Ezra, who stepped forward with practiced efficiency. The first blow caught Tucker in the ribs, cracking at least one. The second split his eyebrow. By the third, Tucker was seeing stars, but his jaw remained clenched against any cry of pain. He'd suffered worse in the war. "The girl is my legal ward," Celis continued as though discussing the weather. "The property she inherited rightfully belongs to me until she turns 21. The law's on my side." Tucker fought to keep his breathing steady. "Is that why you left her to die in that corn crib?" "Real fatherly." Another nod. Another blow. "She found documents she wasn't meant to see," Celis said. "Had to be disciplined." Tucker's mind flashed back to the moment he'd cut Willow free. Her wrists raw and infected, her eyes hollow from dehydration. She'd been barely conscious as he'd lifted her onto his horse. "She caught me examining Father's will," Willow had explained later, as they'd huddled around a small fire, miles from the Hargrove ranch. The real one, not the forgery Celis submitted to the court. "My parents' land, nearly 2,000 acres, is mine. And it sits directly on the proposed railroad route. Worth a fortune, worth killing for." Now, as Tucker endured another beating, he held on to one thought. Willow had escaped. She had the true will indeed hidden in the lining of her dress. She was headed for Harper, for Judge Wilson, for justice. If only Tucker could buy her enough time. Celis stepped closer, studying Tucker's battered face. "You were Terry's Rangers during the war, weren't you? A legend with both guns and knife." He gestured to Tucker's custom Colt .45 and Bowie knife, displayed tauntingly on a nearby table. "Yet you surrendered rather than shoot my boy John when he got the drop on you." Tucker said nothing. "A man changes," Celis mused. "Or perhaps you're not the man they said you were." Tucker's eyes locked with Celis's. "Your mistake is thinking I surrendered to save myself." A flicker of uncertainty crossed the older man's face. "Sheriff Burnett and the others should be back from Harper by nightfall," Celis said, changing the subject. "If they haven't found the girl, we'll need to broaden our search." He turned to leave, then paused. "Last chance to make this easier on yourself." Tucker's laugh was like broken glass. "I've been dead before, Hargrove. Didn't much care for it, but I'm not afraid to go back." After they left, Tucker resumed working the nail he'd pried from the floorboards against his bindings. Blood made his hands slick, but determination drove him forward. The rope began to fray. Night fell. In the distance, a coyote howled. Willow Montgomery had never fired a gun before Tucker Reed taught her. Now, Crouched behind a fallen oak a half-mile from Harper, she checked the Remington Derringer he'd pressed into her hands before they separated. 2 shots, he'd instructed, guiding her fingers. Small but deadly at close range. Keep it hidden. Last resort only. The weight of the tiny weapon had terrified her then. Now it was her only comfort. 3 days of hard riding had taken their toll. Her dress was torn, her hair matted with dust, her skin sunburned. But something had changed inside her. The frightened ward who'd accepted years of the Hargroves' cruelty had died in that corn crib. What emerged was something harder, like steel tempered in fire. Through her hiding spot, Willow observed the main street of Harper. Sheriff Burnett and his deputies were questioning townsfolk, showing her description. Beside them stood John Hargrove, Silas's middle son, his shotgun cradled casually in the crook of his arm. They'd cornered Tucker that way, John approaching openly while Ezra circled behind. Tucker had seen the trap but surrendered his weapons when John aimed at Willow. "Run!" Tucker had urged, his voice low and urgent. "Get to Judge Wilson. I'll be right behind you." A lie. A noble one. Now darkness provided her only ally as she slipped toward the edge of town. Judge Wilson's house stood on the north side, set back from the other buildings. If she could reach him, show him the documents. Movement caught her eye, a familiar silhouette emerging from the shadows near the saloon. Wade Miller, Tucker's neighbor. The men had served on opposite sides of the war, but shared a grudging respect. Wade had sheltered them briefly before the Hargroves picked up their trail. Wade was speaking with a deputy, his posture casual but his eyes alert. Was he betraying them or creating a diversion? Impossible to tell. Willow's hand tightened around the Derringer. She'd survived the Hargroves for 5 years by trusting no one, but Tucker had trusted Wade. Making her decision, she circled wide around the town, using the techniques Tucker had taught her for moving silently. When Wade finally separated from the deputy and headed north, Willow fell into step behind him, keeping to the shadows. At the edge of town, Wade stopped abruptly. "Whoever's following me best show themselves," he called softly, "before I get nervous." Willow stepped forward, Derringer concealed in the folds of her skirt. "It's me." Relief flashed across Wade's weathered face. "Miss Montgomery, thank God. Tucker, captured. The Hargroves have him." Wade cursed under his breath. "Judge Wilson's been taken too. Sheriff arrived this morning with some legal papers, took the judge and his family to the Hargrove Ranch. Something about a proper hearing." The trap was closing. Without Judge Wilson, Willow had no legal recourse. Without Tucker, she had no protection. "They'll force me back," she whispered. "Or worse." Wade's expression hardened. "Not if we get to Tucker first." The nail finally snapped, but not before Tucker had frayed the rope enough to break with brute strength. His wrists were slick with blood as he freed himself and moved silently to the shack's single window. 2 guards outside, one smoking, one dozing, both armed. Tucker assessed his options with cold precision. The skills that had made him infamous during the war hadn't disappeared. He just buried them beneath layers of regret and whiskey. Now he accessed that darker self without hesitation. Willow needed him. That was enough. He slipped to the table where his weapons lay. The familiar weight of his Colt brought a grim satisfaction. He checked the cylinder, fully loaded. 6 shots. 2 guards outside. Unknown number in the main house. Bad odds. He'd faced worse. Moving like a shadow, Tucker positioned himself beside the door. He knocked over a chair, then flattened against the wall. When the first guard entered, Tucker's hand clamped over his mouth while the Bowie knife found his throat in one practiced motion. The second guard never had time to turn before Tucker's knife found its mark between his shoulder blades. Tucker retrieved his weapons, wiping the blood from his knife on a dead man's shirt. The Colt felt right in his hand, an old friend returning in time of need. He checked his ammunition again, loading 2 spare rounds from the guard's belt. No wasted motions, no hesitation. The war had taught him efficiency in killing. Outside, the Hargrove Ranch spread out before him. Main house illuminated by lamplight. Stables to the north, open country to the west. Tucker crouched low, using the shadows and his knowledge of sight lines to remain invisible. His boots made no sound in the dust. His breathing remained controlled despite his cracked ribs. A flicker of movement near the stables caught his eye. 2 riders approaching slowly. Tucker melted deeper into the darkness, drawing his Colt. He sighted down the barrel, finger resting lightly on the trigger. The moonlight revealed Wade Miller's familiar profile. Beside him rode Willow, her back straight with newfound determination. Not a trap. They were here for him. Tucker circled wide, coming up behind them with supernatural quiet. He pressed his knife gently against Wade's back. "That's a good way to get killed," he whispered. Wade stiffened, then relaxed. "Figured you'd escape on your own. Saved us the trouble of a rescue." Tucker turned to Willow, his eyes cataloging her condition in an instant. Exhausted but unharmed. Relief loosened the knot in his chest. "Judge Wilson?" he asked. "Hargrove has him," Wade replied. "Sheriff brought him in this morning. They're holding a hearing tomorrow to settle the guardianship and property claims once and for all." Tucker's mind worked through the implications. With their own judge and witnesses. Convenient. "There's more," Willow added. "I overheard the deputies in town. Hargrove's claiming you kidnapped me, assaulted his sons. There's a bounty on your head now, dead or alive." "Of course. Frame Tucker as a dangerous criminal. Dispose of Willow's evidence. Force her back under Hargrove's control. Clean, efficient, and utterly ruthless." "We need to leave," Wade urged. "Head north to the territorial capital. Find a federal judge." Tucker shook his head. "We'd never make it. Every lawman and bounty hunter within 100 miles will be looking for us." His eyes narrowed as he studied the main house. "No, this ends tonight." The Hargrove dining room resembled a court more than a place for family meals. At the head of the table sat Silas, playing the role of concerned guardian. To his right, Sheriff Burnett examined legal papers with exaggerated attention. Judge Wilson and his wife sat stiffly across from them, their teenage daughter weeping quietly beside them. "It's quite simple," Silas was saying. "The girl is unstable, dangerous even. These fabricated documents are evidence of her delusions." Judge Wilson's face remained impassive, but his eyes burned with barely contained fury. "And if I rule against you?" Sheriff Burnett's hand moved casually to his holster. "Then we'd have serious concerns about your judgment, Your Honor." The conversation halted at the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen. Sheriff Burnett drew his pistol, nodding to Ezra and John to investigate. Neither returned. "What's happening?" Silas demanded, rising from his chair. The answer came when Tucker Reed materialized in the doorway. Colt leveled steadily at Silas's chest. Behind him, Willow entered with the Derringer trained on Sheriff Burnett. "Evening, folks," Tucker drawled. "Hope we're not interrupting." Sheriff Burnett's face darkened with rage. "Reed, you're a dead man." "Not today," Tucker gestured with his pistol. "Weapons on the table. Slow and careful." When both men had disarmed, Wade appeared, ushering the judge's family toward the door. "Get them to safety," Tucker instructed. "We'll be right behind you." Judge Wilson paused beside Willow. "The documents?" She withdrew the folded papers from her dress lining, handing them over with trembling fingers. The judge examined them briefly, his expression shifting from doubt to grim certainty. "These appear authentic. The land grant, the will, even the original guardianship papers limiting Hargrove's control." He looked at Silas with disgust. "You forged court documents." "She's a minor," Silas snapped. "The law..." The law doesn't permit imprisonment, starvation, or attempted murder. Tucker cut in, his free hand gesture to the angry welt still visible on Willow's wrists. Judge, I'm surrendering myself to your custody. Whatever charges they've invented against me, I'll answer for them in a proper court. Judge Wilson nodded slowly. A wise decision, Mr. Reed. Sheriff Burnett's laugh was ugly. You won't make it to any court. The moment you step outside, the crack of Tucker's pistol silenced him. The bullet splintered the table inches from the sheriff's hand. That wasn't a request. Tucker's voice had gone deadly quiet. Willow, take the judge and go. She hesitated, sensing his intent. Tucker, now. After they'd gone, Tucker kept his weapon trained on the two men. You have a choice. Face justice for what you've done, or... Or what? Celis sneered. Tucker's smile never reached his eyes. Or face me. The tension in the room crackled like lightning before a storm. Sheriff Burnett glanced toward his discarded pistol, calculating the distance. Don't, Tucker warned, his voice flat. You're too slow. Always were. Recognition flickered in Burnett's eyes. Wait, I know you. Fort Smith, 68, the shootout at Donovan's saloon. Tucker didn't confirm or deny it. His focus remained on Celis, who had gone very still. You were a hired gun, Celis said slowly. After the war, they called you the Ghost. I've been called worse. Celis's thin lips curled into a smile. Then perhaps we can come to an arrangement. The girl's land is worth a small fortune with the railroad coming through. I could use a man with your talents. Tucker's expression didn't change. You misunderstand. I'm not for sale. Everyone has a price. Not me. Not anymore. Something shifted in Celis's demeanor, the realization that negotiation had failed. He reached slowly into his vest pocket. Tucker didn't hesitate. His first shot took Celis in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The second disarmed Sheriff Burnett as he lunged for his weapon, the bullet grazing his hand. I said don't, Tucker reminded him calmly. Clutching his bleeding shoulder, Celis revealed what he'd been reaching for. Not a weapon, but a small key. Insurance, he gasped, in my study, safe behind the painting. The real reason I wanted the Montgomery land. I don't care about your schemes, Tucker said. You should. It involves you. Celis's eyes gleamed with malice despite his pain. And the girl's father, Peter Montgomery, didn't die of fever. Tucker's finger tightened on the trigger. Explain. The safe, Celis repeated. The truth about what happened 5 years ago, about who you really are. Tucker bound the two men securely, then followed Celis's directions to the study. The painting, a mediocre landscape, concealed a small wall safe. Using the key, Tucker opened it and discovered a leather portfolio inside. The documents within told a story that made his blood run cold. Peter Montgomery hadn't died of typhoid fever as reported. He'd been murdered, poisoned slowly to make it appear like disease. The culprits, Celis Hargrove and his business partners in the railroad company. But the most damning document was a contract, a bounty notice with Tucker's name on it, dated 6 years earlier. He had been hired to kill Peter Montgomery, a job he'd refused. Tucker remembered the meeting clearly. A man representing business interests had approached him in a Kansas City saloon. The target, a farmer refusing to sell land needed for the railroad. Tucker, still lost in post-war darkness, had initially accepted the money. But when he'd tracked Montgomery to his homestead and seen him with his family, with young Willow, something had broken inside him. He couldn't do it. He'd returned the money and warned Montgomery that others would come. What he hadn't known was that Hargrove had taken the contract next, and succeeded. Tucker slammed the safe shut, documents in hand. The pieces fit together now. Why Montgomery had spared his life during the war. Why he'd made Tucker promise to check on his family. He must have recognized Tucker as the man who'd warned him, even if he hadn't known the full story. A debt that could never be repaid. But Tucker would damn well try. He returned to the dining room just as Wade arrived with news. "Riders coming," he reported grimly. "At least a dozen. Looks like Hargrove's men from the North property." Tucker made his decision instantly. Get the judge and Willow to safety. Head for the territorial capital. These documents will ensure federal charges. "What about you?" Wade asked. Tucker checked his Colt. "I'll buy you time." Wade's expression hardened. "You'll die." "Maybe." Tucker handed him the leather portfolio. "Make sure Willow gets this, all of it. She deserves to know the truth." Wade hesitated, then extended his hand. Tucker shook it. Former enemies united by a common cause. "Godspeed," Wade said. "Go." After Wade departed with the prisoners, Tucker methodically prepared the house for defense. Overturned furniture became barricades. Lamp's position strategically would blind anyone entering. He counted his ammunition. 6 rounds in the Colt, 12 spare cartridges, plus whatever he could scavenge. One man against 12. He'd faced worse odds. The first riders arrived just before dawn, silhouettes against the lightening sky. They approached cautiously, spreading out to surround the house. Tucker watched from an upstairs window, cold calculation replacing emotion. The first shot would reveal his position. Make it count. He sighted down the Colt's barrel, targeting the man who appeared to be giving orders. Breathed out, squeezed the trigger. The leader dropped. Chaos erupted. Bullets splintered wood around Tucker as he moved to a new position. Second shot, another man down. Third, a miss, but forced them to scatter for cover. He retreated deeper into the house as they stormed the front door. The barricade he'd built slowed them. The lamp he'd rigged crashed down, splashing burning oil across the entryway. Screams followed. Tucker fired twice more, making each bullet count. 5 down, 7 to go. A shotgun blast tore through the wall beside him. Tucker rolled, came up firing. 6 down. But they were inside now, converging on his position. A bullet grazed his thigh. Another his ear. Tucker killed one more attacker with his knife when the man rounded a corner too carelessly. 7 down, 5 to go. His ammunition was nearly spent. Blood loss was making his vision blur. But he'd bought enough time. By now, Wade, Willow, and the judge would be miles away, heading for safety and justice. It would have to be enough. Tucker reloaded his final rounds, then stepped into the open hallway. Let them come. 3 days later, in a hotel room in the territorial capital, Willow Montgomery sat beside Judge Wilson as federal marshals took their statements. The judge's testimony, combined with the documents Tucker had discovered, had already resulted in warrants for Celis Hargrove and Sheriff Burnett. But there was no word of Tucker. "The marshals will ride back to Harper today," Judge Wilson assured her. "If Reed survived—" "He didn't," Wade said from the doorway. His expression was grim. "Hargrove's men. Too many." Willow's hands trembled as she opened the leather portfolio Wade had given her. Inside were the answers to questions she hadn't known to ask. Her father's murder, the railroad conspiracy, Tucker's initial contract and subsequent refusal. "He was hired to kill father," she whispered. "But he didn't," Wade reminded her. "He warned him instead, cost himself a small fortune, and made powerful enemies. And still father died. Not by Reed's hand. That's why he spent years looking for you, trying to make it right." Willow closed the portfolio. "He saved me. He fought for me. And I never got to thank him." "You can thank him now," a voice said from the corridor. Willow's head snapped up. There, leaning against the door frame, stood Tucker Reed. His face was bruised, one arm in a sling, his clothes torn and bloodstained, but very much alive. How? Wade began. Tucker's smile was grim. Seems I'm hard to kill. He nodded toward the two federal marshals who flanked him. These gentlemen found me half dead on the trail. Apparently, Judge Wilson's telegraph reached the Capitol. Willow crossed the room in 3 strides and threw her arms around him, mindful of his injuries. I thought you were dead. Nearly was. Tucker's good arm encircled her briefly before he stepped back. Judge Wilson, the documents? The judge nodded. Federal prosecutors are drafting charges. Conspiracy, murder, fraud. Hargrove and his associates will face justice. And the land? Legally Miss Montgomery's. The court has recognized her emancipation despite her age. Given the circumstances, Tucker's shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. Willow studied his face. I know about the contract. About father. A shadow crossed his features. I should have done more. You did what you could, and you've more than honored your promise to him. The marshals cleared their throats. Mr. Reed, one said, we should continue to the doctor's office. Those wounds need proper attention. Tucker nodded, then turned back to Willow. I'll be moving on once I'm healed. Heading west, maybe. California. The words hit her like a physical blow. Why? You have your life back now. Land. Future. You don't need a man with my past casting shadows. That's not your decision to make, Willow said firmly. The land needs managing. 2,000 acres is too much for one person. Tucker's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying I need a partner. Someone who knows the territory. Someone I trust. She held his gaze. Someone who's already proven he's willing to die for what's right. Before Tucker could respond, one of the federal marshals stepped forward. Actually, Mr. Reed, I have a proposition for you as well. He produced a badge. U.S. Marshal Service is always looking for men with your particular skills, especially in territories where the law is still finding its footing. Tucker looked between the badge and Willow, something unreadable in his expression. Could do both, Wade suggested from across the room. Marshal by assignment, land manager between jobs. For the first time since Willow had known him, Tucker looked genuinely uncertain. You once told me every man deserves a second chance, she reminded him softly. Tucker's weathered face softened. That what this is? That's what this is. 1 month later, Tucker Reed stood on the porch of the newly constructed main house on the Montgomery property. His badge caught the sunset's light as he surveyed the land that stretched to the horizon. 2,000 acres of promise and possibility. Behind him, Willow emerged from the house, a stack of letters in hand. Railroad company's new management sent another offer, she said. Fair price this time. No threats attached. Tucker nodded. Your decision. Our decision, she corrected. Partners, remember? His lips quirked in a rare smile. Partners. A rider appeared in the distance, approaching fast. Tucker's hand moved instinctively to his Colt. Marshal Reed, the rider called as he drew closer. Telegram from Judge Wilson. There's trouble in Silver Creek. Gang of outlaws took over the town. Tucker's expression shifted, the seasoned fighter replacing the land manager in an instant. How many? He asked. 6, maybe 7, all armed. Tucker looked to Willow. She nodded her understanding. Be careful, she said. Tucker checked his weapon, then mounted his waiting horse. Always am. As he rode toward the horizon, Willow watched the man who'd saved her life become a silhouette against the setting sun. A complicated man with a violent past who'd found a new purpose, a second chance. Justice, like redemption, was a journey, not a destination, and Tucker Reed would walk that path for as long as it took, one day at a time, one bullet at a time if necessary. In the untamed West, sometimes justice needed teeth. Sometimes it needed a man who understood darkness because he lived within it. A man willing to stand between innocence and those who would harm them. A man like Tucker Reed,